Okie doke. Well, welcome everybody. I'll hit the news. I didn't really come up with a topic this week because nothing really interested me, and I'm starting to do the rewrite on the level 2 book. So I'm anticipating lots of interesting, interesting to the geeks like us, but mostly boring to the rest of the world, things about solar. So I'm always constantly reminded by Annie that not everybody shares my passion for solar. So okay, doke. So let's see. As far as the news, there was a report, an article about a resource website. I looked it up. It's called sustainableenergyaction.org. And that website is supposed to be a lot of resources for inspectors, homeowners who are going through an inspection, that kind of thing. I looked at it, it doesn't look like it's really there yet, although there is a lot of good stuff there about giving you links to put input into the National Electrical Code, things of that nature. One of the concerns I had with that particular website, but I'd encourage you to look at it, is it struck me like it was one of those created by committee where everybody is talking about stakeholders and, our goal is to mitigate our, empower our stakeholders. And I'm like, oh God, that just turns me off. So if they could just talk in real English instead of, corporate buzz, I think that would be better. But anyway, there's some interesting things there. The House just passed the Build Back Better bill, the BBB. And I know we're going to have a report. And Bruce, I see you're on here. Are you're going to be attending the webinar on Friday?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so maybe next Tuesday you can give a report back on what the implications for renewables and solar are in the Build Back Better bill, if it ever gets through Joe Manchin in the House or in the Senate. So we'll see how that goes. Although, if you recall, my take on Joe Manchin and his gutting of the infrastructure bill about the solar, I think he actually did everybody a favor there, because anyway, if you want more information, I'll be happy to. But that thing that they were talking about incentivizing utilities to go solar, I think was kind of counterproductive. It's going to spend $150 billion to no good result. Couple other things. Iron Ridge is now integrated in with the open solar design platform. And the only reason I mention that is I've mentioned open solar before for people who are just maybe not in solar as a pure career designing solar systems, but open solar is a free software. So if you just look up open solar, and it allows you to use remote site assessments, and it's really, really a powerful tool. And I guess the way they're making their money is they're integrating products in with the program. So it recommends, you can get product specs for different panels and different inverters and stuff like that. So, if that doesn't bother you, you don't have to use those, but it's a nice tool for coming in, using Google Earth, designing your system, sizing the system, integrating in with PV watts. But the nice thing about Iron Ridge is I've used their design tool before, where you can figure out what the supports have to be, how far apart, how much concrete you need for these vertical supports for ground mounted systems. And now that's fully integrated in with the open solar. So that's kind of a nice, again, a couple of nice free tools. And speaking of racking systems, I sat in on a webinar last week from a company called Powerfield Racking. And I found that really interesting. Bill, you watched that thing too? So I'm going to go ahead and post in here in the chat a link to that video. They posted the video of this, But I found that a really kind of, it's sort of amazing in its simplicity, the racking system, at least I thought. It's a ground mounted system, but it's not, it cannot be used on top of buildings. It's a ballasted system. And basically all it is just this plastic tub that's got connection points for solar panels, and you fill it with aggregate from the site, and it's heavy enough to hold the thing. So you just get one piece of plastic, and you use you use two for a panel, or you can space them out so that you can straddle the panels. So it's one per panel, but you got to make sure the site's level. Yeah, Bill, is that you were?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's panels plus one.
Yeah.
The number of panels plus one.
Yeah, if you're going to do it, you know, where everything's level. But if you want each panel to operate independently, then you got to have two. If this site is like on a hillside or undulating or whatever. But what I really was thinking about for this is it would be a perfect installation for old abandoned parking lots or airport runways or something like that, where you can just come in
theaters.
With this. Pardon?
Drive-in theaters.
Yeah, drive-in theaters, whatever. I mean, you've got this beautiful flat area. There is no digging, no pylons, no anything. You just lay these buckets there, fill them with whatever aggregate you got, put your panels. Obviously, there'd be some trenching for your wiring and stuff like that away from the array. But within the array itself, it's just sitting there, and you could do it temporarily, remove it, move it, whatever. But I don't think it's designed as a, you know, set it up and move it quickly. But if you've got, like, say 5 years from now, you think you might develop that commercial property, you could put in this solar array and then move it to another location with a minimum of disruption. So it's worth a look at the video. It wasn't a super long webinar, so I found it very interesting. Another product that I just saw was released was Solar Edge has come out with a 440 watt optimizer. So that's getting a little bit bigger in their product line. I think that's just a trend that we're seeing with the panels getting bigger, the wattage getting bigger. And with that in mind, I also saw that there's a company called Matrix. It's a Canadian company. They've come out with an 800 watt panel that they're selling. And it's basically two 400 watt panels, you know, hooked together. So I'm not quite sure where the application would be. That would be a quite heavy thing to move around. Probably in a utility scale environment or something like that, where you're just getting multiple people lifting it onto a racking. They're saying it's so innovative, it's the new thing in solar, but it's kind of the old thing in solar coming back, because it used to be when the panels were small, they made, when the modules were small, because I got to get my terminology here right. If you hook multiple modules together in a unit, it's referred to as a panel. So the fact that in our industry in recent years, we haven't really had panels on the market. We've only had modules on the market. So now we're starting to see, I guess, panels again, where you've got two modules hooked together and serving as a single unit that you install. So anyway, if anybody works with 800 watt panels in the future, let me know. I'd like to know. After you get back from your hernia operation, I'd like to know if you how well you did. Amazon just announced 18 new utility scale PV installations in Arizona, Texas, Georgia, Ohio, and Virginia. That brings them up to 274 utility scale PV installations. And they're saying they will meet their goal of 100% from solar by 2025, which is 5 years earlier than their original goal. So Amazon is certainly going big into it. And speaking of the evil empire, the Koch brothers have just bought into a utility scale PV company. So the Koch brothers are joining us in the world of renewable. So I don't know if I'm happy about that or whatever. I guess, you know. They always say, keep your enemies close, right?
Yep.
And
Well, there's only one of them now.
oh, there is, yeah. Okay, well, I'm sure there are many Cokes out there who are going to be coming up through the ranks. And the last piece of news I saw, there is a Green Energy Ohio conference coming up tomorrow and the next day. It's an afternoon webinar thing. Let me go ahead and copy the link for that if anybody's interested. It is a fee. There is a fee for it. So, but not expensive. It's like $50, I think, $25 if you're a student. So there's the conference link to it. Anyway, I thought I'd mention it just because I used to be on the board of Green Energy Ohio, so I probably ought to at least promote it, although not enough to actually attend it. So I'm going to be busy. I'm actually going to be doing a couple of solar assessments tomorrow. So, all right, that was all the news I had. Did anybody have anything, Bill?
Yeah, I got 3 questions or comments. Number 1, what is the nature of their follow-on PV course? You mentioned earlier that, and I'll have you answer that.
The follow-on PV course, what, I'm not with you yet.
You said you were working on
Oh,
the second, I didn't get it.
yeah, it's the solar, the ETA level 2. And that is, I do have a textbook already, the designing and installing, but last year I updated to the 2020 code the entire understanding photovoltaics and the level 1 course. So I feel like that's really in good shape. But the level 2 is for people who have decided to make solar a career. And it primarily focuses on commercial systems and project management. So we get a lot more into the financing, a lot more into the regulations, a lot more into OSHA safety issues. That's a big part of that program, although typically let other people teach the OSHA stuff, but then get into commercial systems. So really anything short of utility scale, because that brings in a whole different set of requirements and regulations. So the commercial level. And ETA's part of their certification process is they have the level 1 certification, which really focuses on residential. And then they have the commercial, which is the level 2. So those are, so commercial and project management. That's as opposed to the NABCEP, where NABCEP has said, okay, we've got the installation and then we've got a designer program. So they've kind of split it along those lines. They've also got an inspector's certification, things of that nature. I personally think that's a bit of a false division, because most people who are doing installation have to know something about design, even at a grunt level, because they're going to find that the site does not match, the specs that they're working from. So they've got to know enough to know, okay, if I change this, have I violated some code? Have I done something wrong? But usually in small operations, it's going to be the same person who's designing and installing the system. So, especially at the residential level. So I don't see that as a distinction at that level. Okay. Your second one, Bill?
You mentioned, I think you've had some discussions with my teaching partner, Gabe, about teaching a certification, and I'm sorry he's not here today. We probably will move in that direction. We had the last class meeting last night of the 10-week course here in Houston. And I just want to mention, we actually had an installer come in and speak. And it was great because they he went through the design process. He indicated that he charges $3 a watt before the federal tax credit. He also mentioned what he pays his crew, which was, quite candid. Frequently, you don't get that kind of information. And I'll also mention that in addition to him being the speaker, we gave all the 20 participants a little inexpensive voltmeter. And I went through an exercise with a lithium cell and a 7-ohm resistor, measuring voltage, measuring ohms, calculating the current, and then measuring the current. And it was kind of a disaster in the sense that I think some of the students took the current position of the voltmeter and measured what the current will come out of the battery. They didn't remember to hook the resistor in series with the battery. And so they probably fried a fuse within the meter. So next time I'm going to be very specific about what the steps are. They didn't understand millivolts, microamps, and all that stuff. I'll have to explain all of that. And so it's an evolving thing. And maybe after I put together a Word document, Jay, I'll share it with you. You might want to include it. I don't know what you do in that area in terms of using a voltmeter.
Yeah, we typically have given away those Harbor Freight volt amp meters, to the students, but I always tell them, don't use this for measuring amps because it's a cheap piece of shit and it's probably going to fry, so, that's how I avoid it. We talk about amps in theory, but I know with those meters, you got to reset the wires if you get anything over a fraction of an amp. So if you don't reset the wires, I have had people catch the wires on fire when they're trying to check the amps. So that can be a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, and the third item, just in passing, a friend of mine purchased 2 salvage Nissan Leafs. One of them had a quarter of the battery capacity. The other one was totaled. And in a span of 3 hours, we removed 2 packs and installed a good pack in a good vehicle. So I'd always wanted to do that. We had a forklift, we had floor jacks, floor supports, and it was really smooth. And the car worked afterwards.
So you're saying that out of those 2 battery packs, you were able to salvage enough good cells to make a
No,
good...
we had one pack that was 11/12 capacity. It had only lost 1 bar, and the other pack was down to 3 bars from 12. So we took the good pack and put it in a car that was really clean. One of them was, the other car was totaled, right? He just bought them salvage at salvage prices. And I may actually at some point buy some cells from him. I have a Selectria E10 pickup truck, and I don't know whether anybody's seen one of those. It was engineered, and it has 2 motors, 2 AC motors. And I may try to buy some cells from this guy and make a pack at some point in the future. Nice lithium.
When you did that, did you pull apart the individual cells, or did you just use the strings of cells?
Well, when we did what?
When you were reconstructing the packs.
You mean when we were swapping out packs?
Yeah. Oh, I thought you put in the 11/12 one without replacing any cells in there?
That's correct. We just swapped the boxes.
Oh, okay. I wonder if you can go in, how much work would be involved in testing individual cells and replacing.
Yeah, I may be wrong, but I believe you essentially destroy a seal if you open the box. And it's not meant for reassembly.
Mhm.
But I'll, as I learn more going forward, I'll clarify that.
Well, you got the
I know there's
multimeter,
one
you can test them.
There's
You can
one
test
company
them.
out in California that's buying Nissan Leaf battery packs and setting them in a rack. I think somebody mentioned that, and providing, arbitraging the price of electricity. They charge the batteries when the price of electricity is low and discharge them when it's high.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I know there's a company here or a nonprofit in Athens that's taking old lithium ion cells and reconstructing battery packs out of them. Not quite sure how they do it. I know they do it on the cell level, but I don't think it's for automotive. I think it might still just be for, who knows, for cell phones or for computers, laptops, or I'm not even really sure. So, well, that's interesting. Now the Nissan Leaf, if I remember right, is the only vehicle that's compliant with the V2G, the vehicle to grid protocols that are out there. Everything since
I have
2004.
not heard of that in the United States. I think maybe in Japan they're doing it, but I have not heard of that being done. I mean, I don't know, maybe the brand new models have
Well, I
that
think-
feature, but I don't know. I have a 11-year-old Leaf, so I just don't know.
Yeah, Tony, you're
Yeah,
in the-
Jay, you're 100% right. The only one that have it right now, the Leaf. Volkswagen's going to drop it in the models later this year, and it'll be standard. It's coming standard. So I was talking to a lot of folks at Ford and GM. All of their stuff will be bi-directional. The Ford F-150 Lightning made a pretty big splash with its ability to go bi-directional and power the home in islanded mode after some electrical upgrades to the house. So that's kind of the future.
Am I remembering right that the Leaf since 2004 has been compliant, or is that too far back? Maybe it's 2014.
Yeah, I think it might have been 14.
Yeah. Okay.
You mean for vehicle to grid?
Yeah, that's what they're claiming anyway. It will not void their warranty is really
Right,
what
exactly,
the issue is.
exactly, right.
You probably have to hack the system in order to make voltage appear at the 240 volt outlet on the front of the car. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. So Jay, again, spot on. All they really said was you can pull electrons out of this container and not void the warranty. That's about as far as they took it, right? There was no really accompanying power electronics infrastructure or willingness that they were going to do to like put it in your home or put it in the grid. It was just, yes, thou can remove electrons from this battery and push it elsewhere. Obviously, that's the only.
Let me ask this: Are the electrons DC
Yes.
or AC?
Yes, DC.
DC.
Everything that touches
So,
a battery is DC.
and I think the battery voltage is shy under 300 volts. Is that?
Yeah, so it fluctuates. I have to think about the Leaf, but I think it's like nominal 400.
Oh, 400.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
you
well, I
have
think-
to.
I think they're still
ahead.
working on a protocol as
They
to
are.
what V2G will be, or so I think what Nissan was saying is, hey, somebody's got to go first. We're willing to sort of put ourselves out there, assuming that the protocol will in fact not damage our vehicles.
Right.
As you're drawing. The other ones, Tesla is sort of like Apple. They're trying to be more proprietary about their whole world. But everybody else is, I think, just waiting and seeing. But you're saying, I know, like you said, Volkswagen, it seemed to me there were a number of them that were coming out saying, we're anticipating with the next model year. And so it must be that in the background somewhere, this protocol is pretty well fixed, because my guess is the manufacturers are looking at it saying, yeah, that's not going to cause us a problem.
Yeah, and right now it's just such a delicate time because a lot of these companies are making the transition now. Obviously GM got into, had to do a multi-billion-dollar recall of the bolts not too long ago. So like, I think there's a lot of like, kind of concern that this is somewhat untested technology, and to go on top of that and say, oh yeah, you can pull it to charge your, power your house for God knows who long. It's a little too much risk. A lot of them are willing to take, but it's all coming. It's all coming.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Any other comments? Tony, did you have any updates on your stuff? You were going to go.
Yeah, I was actually, the last 2 months I've been out in, 2 trips in the last month. I've been out in LA. It's looking like, kind of basically doing a lot of modeling and number crunching this last week. It's looking like these solar hubs will not be grid connected. So they'll be completely disconnected from the grid. Solar plus storage plus DC fast charging is what will get put up. Because right now in LA, you're looking at 18 to 24 months to wait for a grid interconnection for a DC fast charging station. So from the day you say you have an electric fleet or you want to electrify your fleet and you want DC fast chargers, from the day you ask the utility company for that to the day that you're charging your vehicles is 2 years. So we're not going to do that. We'll probably work the grid interconnection concurrently. It'll make the hubs a little bit more expensive because you'll have to capture every drop of sun in a battery and not be able to push it back to the grid. But with high levels of utilization, which is really all the difference, you can still make the math pencil. Because a lot of the problems is with just chargers in general, not even solar integrated chargers. Whether you're using a PPA or whatever, you're paying for your electrons, whether you're using solar electrons, whether you're using them or not. So the only way that pencils is if you can, push utilization up to, 80+%. So you can do that if you have an electric vehicle fleet and you can you can tell your drivers to charge there, right? Like that's how you solve that problem. So we're doing a lot of with modeling for location, and then layered on top of that. Actually, we use I use PV watts, right? Something that I learned in your class to just get like a rough swag on solar radiation in areas that people were looking at.
Is this grid tie-in issue only a California thing, or is
No, it's all over the place. But it's just really bad in California. One, because it's California, and two, because the grid is already, this is true generally, but it's kind of overstressed in that area, and then they layer on top of that, they layer in kind of regulations, and then layer in like forest fires, right? So like they're really concerned about what gets approved and when, how long in the backlog, because everyone wants solar in California. So a lot of the legislation is kind of mandating it. So then everyone wants to do it, everyone needs to do it, and there's just a backlog of work. It's gotten so bad. This is super insider information. It's gotten so bad in Santa Monica. I went out to an empty parking lot where Tesla trailers bolted to a 18-wheeler trailer. Tesla dropped off a big ass battery pack in DC fast charging station for their drivers to meet demand. They will truck out this flatbed, drop it, it hangs out for however long. They'll use telematics or whatever to monitor it remotely. When the battery goes down, they go back, pull it back to the head shed, recharge the battery, and put it back, drive it back out to the site. That's how, because like if you're literally needing them, like you're looking at 2 years to install another, and that's it right.
Is this only if you're going to be feeding the grid, like for feed-in tariffs? Because clearly a business needing a connection point can't wait for 2 years to draw from the grid.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's kind of twofold. One is like the real issue is the amount of power that it takes to do DC fast charging, right? You got to put it in another transformer. You got to step up the energy to be able to pump out potentially 150 kilowatts or more. At a site, you'd imagine every pump, if you will, if you're talking about charging stations, every pump is 50 plus kilowatts, and maybe you have 10 of them on the site. That requires a tremendous amount of infrastructure to be able to step the energy back up to push it at that rate, right? So that's part of the problem. The other problem is that major upgrade plus feeding back into the grid. And that's why these wait times are just so bonkers.
That makes sense. Speaking, it occurred to me the infrastructure bill might alleviate some of that problem, hopefully. And on a side note with that infrastructure bill, I have a good friend who is a vice president with a company called Power and Tel. They do infrastructure supply for telecommunications and the power grid. And he said their corporate basically told him he's in charge of most of their international sales outside of Canada. And they basically said, we're changing focus almost 100% to the United States for the next couple of years, because that's where the safe money is. You know, so unless you've got like a 5-star investment client down in Latin America, forget about it. You're not going to service that account. We're going to keep all of our available cash to work on domestic, because they're anticipating just huge amounts of money flowing in from the US government. And that's where they want to focus. So I think maybe one of the unintended consequences of something like this might be in developing countries, where it basically cuts off the supply, you know, for their projects, because the US, we've seen supply chain issues at every level. It's going to affect grid development and infrastructure and everything. And I guess another cute story on that, Paulo was telling me, he took his boss, the company is headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, and everybody are good old boys, you know, it's like a 7th generation company or something. So he was wanting to, he took them, there was a conference in Switzerland or someplace, and they were going through the trade show. And these companies had 2 different product lines for sale oftentimes. One was for the rest of the world and one was for the United States. And that his bosses from Memphis were sort of puffing their chests out going, hey, you know, that's because the US is so far ahead of everybody else. And the vendors were saying, no, actually, completely the opposite. You know, you're using outdated technologies that no one else in the world is using. So you're a big enough market, we have to carry it, but nobody else wants to touch this crap, you know, basically was what they were talking about. So I think it's high time for our infrastructure to be updated to meet the infrastructure of Sri Lanka, you know. All right, any other comments, any questions?
Jay David, I'm here from Trinidad and Tobago. I joined in a little late today. I have a couple of questions. I have a client that I'm doing a proposal for in Trinidad and Tobago. And basically what he is asking for is that the inverter output should be around 50 kilowatt output. Now this is not a grid tie system, but basically what they're asking for is an inverter specs that will do the job on an off-grid mode for now. And later down, when they want, they could grid tie it afterwards. Because what happened in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't allow grid tie interconnection with our systems by law. But the anticipation is that within a year, 2 years, those laws may change and Trinidad will go grid tie. So this installation is predominantly an off-grid installation. The way I explained it, a requirement of about 50 kilowatt output, but we want to use that same inverter without having to go and buy additional equipment when to make it grid tie. So you have any suggestions? I know 50 kilowatt hybrid inverters are very difficult. I can simplify those things.
50 kilowatts is a pretty big, obviously this is a commercial system, I assume.
Yes, it is. That's commercial.
I wish that Don was on the call, because what came to my mind was the Solarc system that he uses. I know he's completely off grid, but it seems to me those come in 10 kilowatt inverter sizes, and you could just, you know, hook 5 of them together. But that is a grid tied, but also an independent option. Of course, the batteries are going to be an issue. Are you going to be using lithium ion, or are you going to have to go
Lithium
with.
and battery bank is being specified right through for the system.
Yeah. Does anybody else have worked with a system that is standalone? I know most of the bigger systems are anticipating grid tie from the outset. You know, they're DC coupled systems, but they're not designed as a standalone unit. They're there temporarily. But Solark, SOLARK, I think is one that has that as their design. So that's the only thing that comes to mind for me. Anybody else have any suggestions? Now, that's interesting that you're not allowed to tie to the grid. I wouldn't have known, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Is that
Trinidad,
because they don't think the grid is robust enough?
well, before renewable energy came into Trinidad, our Electricity Act was so worded in such a way that it was not really allowed to connect to the grid. But over the last 8 or 9 years, implementation of PV systems in Trinidad has been totally off grid. There is a movement now by our public utilities to revamp the act, and the explanation was that, as I said before, the grid was our old grid, and there were some concerns about interconnection with grid-tie systems in terms of stability issues and stuff like that. So they seem to be upgrading the grid as we go along, and they want to revamp the electricity act. So what is happening now, we're getting a lot of clients in Trinidad who want the off-grid, but they want systems now being configured in a way that when the grid tie comes, if it comes, they don't have to go and reinvest in any new, like a AC coupled system, to buy another inverter to connect it back with the off-grid inverter together. So they're asking for this one-shop kind of deal, hybrid inverter format, where we can put it on.
I would give, I know Solark is known for having really good customer service, and they're out of Texas, if I remember right. Maybe if you look them up and call them, they may have some good suggestions as to what they're doing, and they may even see this as an opportunity to establish themselves in Trinidad, Tobago.
Okay.
Is your grid, do you operate at 60 Hertz 240 at the residence, or is it a hybrid?
60 Hertz, 115 to 30.
Okay, yeah. So basically like the United States, right?
Yeah.
Because I thought some of the Caribbean islands did both, if I remember right.
Yes, Jamaica, Barbados, they go grid tie off grid, so they are okay with that. A couple of other Antigua, Barbados, I think Guyana, they all into grid tie already. It's just our country has been a bit of a lag behind the others when it comes to these things. Implementing those that recently our country has been awarded an installation of 137 megawatts utility scale system that is being conducted by BP and Shell as a project in Trinidad, and there's a couple of other megawatt size projects the government has now launched. So because of that, they're now looking to sort out the grid tie and the interconnection arrangement in the country in terms of licensing and stuff like that.
Okay, is three-phase power an issue there at all? I mean, because a lot of these bigger systems would
my one does no. I mean, there could be transform, but it's just 115 to the battery bank was pretty large. It came up to about 300, just about 300 kilowatt hours per day requirement. Pretty sizable load. It's a large building owned by one of our the oil companies. They're kind of revamping the whole building as a training center. So it's the whole works, air conditioning, heating, lighting. They doing it as a pilot project, trying to convert the whole building off grid. You know, and then of course, and this is a tender that went out to contractors in Trinidad. And during the meeting, they now come up and say, well, you know, we want the off grid, but here what we want to cater for grid tie down the line as well. So you know, kind of trying to reach out and see what options are available in terms of the systems that I could put for this. I was looking at SMA tri power inverters, but I don't know if those are mostly, I think, DC or AC couples. We'll have to go with that if I try to implement that, and if you're familiar with them.
Okay. All right, I don't think I was losing you a little bit. You didn't ask me a question, right? Or did you?
Yeah, no, I told her that I was looking at SMA, the tri-power high voltage storage inverters. But it seems to me that those inverters have to be working at AC coupled configuration to work. So that was
Yeah.
another yeah.
Yeah, if you're probably going to find most standalone systems that exist out there were never anticipated to be that large. So whatever you're going to do, is going to have to be probably multiples connected together.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. So, all right. Any other questions or anything for the good of the cause before we call it a day? All right, not seeing any. I'll see you guys next week, next Tuesday. Take care.